It began as another tranquil morning at Marina Point, where local fishermen had gathered for decades to earn their living from the sea. Nobody expected that this peaceful haven would become a battleground when a gang of rebellious troublemakers decided to challenge a decorated combat veteran who had seen far worse than their intimidation tactics. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The gentle lapping of waves against weathered wooden pylons provided a soothing rhythm at Marina Point, a modest fishing dock that had served the coastal community of Port Harbor for generations. The salt-laden breeze carried the familiar scent of the sea, brackish water, fresh catch, and the diesel fuel of fishing vessels. Tom Richardson, a former Marine Force Recon operator turned commercial fisherman, stood at the end of the main pier, his weathered hands methodically preparing his gear for another day on the water. For Tom, the dock was more than just a place of business. It was a sanctuary where he had found purpose after leaving the military. The other fishermen respected his quiet strength and natural leadership, qualities forged through multiple combat deployments. They appreciated how he always looked out for the community, especially the younger fishermen just starting their careers. The morning crowd had already settled into their usual routines. Old Jack Murphy, a seasoned captain with 4 decades of experience, was sharing coffee from his battered thermos with Sarah Chen, a young boat owner who had recently taken over her father's fishing operation. Near the bait shop, Mike Thompson, the dock manager, chatted with a group of deckhands about the weather forecast while they loaded ice into their coolers. The familiar atmosphere of mutual respect and camaraderie had helped Tom adjust to civilian life. Here, everyone understood the unwritten code of the water. You look out for your fellow fishermen, help when needed, and treat the sea with the respect it demands. The dock's tight-knit community reminded him of the brotherhood he'd known in the Marines, though he rarely spoke about his military service. Tom was securing his lines when he first heard the distant roar of powerful engines. The sound was distinctly out of place among the usual morning noises of the working dock. Several heads turned as 3 modified speedboats rounded the harbor entrance, their unmuffled engines shattering the peaceful dawn. The vessels, painted in garish colors and adorned with provocative artwork, belonged to a group known locally as the Harbor Rebels, young troublemakers who had recently begun terrorizing smaller marinas along the coast. At the helm of the lead boat was Marcus the Shark Thorne, a former championship racer who had lost his license due to reckless behavior and drug allegations. His reputation for intimidation and vandalism had grown over the past months, but law enforcement struggled to catch him in the act. The Harbor Rebels had already forced several small fishing operations to abandon their traditional grounds, claiming choice waters for their illegal racing and smuggling activities. The speedboats circled the main dock once before cutting their engines, drifting toward the fuel station with practiced precision. Marcus stood at the bow of his vessel, his muscled frame covered in elaborate tattoos, a gold chain glinting against his tanned chest. His crew of 8 spread across the 3 boats, their expressions a mixture of arrogance and anticipation. "Nice little setup you've got here," Marcus called out, his voice carrying across the water with practiced authority. The other fishermen exchanged worried glances, but Tom continued his preparations, his movements unhurried and deliberate. He had seen this type before, men who confused intimidation with strength, who mistook fear for respect. Mike Thompson stepped forward from the bait shop, his stance nervous but determined. "The fuel station's closed for maintenance," he announced, trying to keep his voice steady. "You'll have to try the marina up north." Marcus laughed, the sound sharp and hostile. "Closed? That's not very hospitable. Boys, why don't we show these folks how to properly welcome guests?" At his signal, 2 of his crew members jumped onto the dock, their heavy boots thundering against the wooden planks. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Several deckhands moved closer to their vessels, while others subtly positioned themselves between the troublemakers and Sarah Chen, who stood her ground near her boat. Old Jack Murphy's hand tightened around his coffee thermos, his weathered face set in a grim expression. Tom finally looked up from his work, his calm gaze taking in the scene before him. He had witnessed this moment countless times before, the instant when good people had to decide whether to stand up to bullies or back down. In his experience, these situations rarely improved on their own. As he straightened to his full height, the morning sun glinted off the Marine Force Recon tattoo on his forearm, a detail that hadn't escaped Marcus's attention. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine the future of Marina Point. The harbor rebels had chosen their target, but they had no idea they were about to challenge someone who had faced down far more dangerous adversaries in the unforgiving theaters of war. The peaceful morning at the fishing dock was about to become anything but quiet. Marcus and his crew swaggered down the dock, their presence casting a shadow over the morning's tranquility. The two rebels who had jumped onto the pier began interfering with nearby equipment, casually knocking over bait buckets and testing locked compartments on the nearest boats. Their actions carried an unmistakable message. They were marking their territory. "You know," Marcus called out, his voice carrying an edge of calculated menace, "we've been expanding our operations along this coast. Seems like this dock would make a perfect pit stop for our activities." He ran his hand along a freshly painted hull, leaving a deliberate smudge. "Real shame if anything happened to these nice boats." Tom set down his gear with careful precision, his movements measured and controlled. Years of combat experience had taught him to read situations like this, the positioning of hostile forces, the subtle tells that preceded violence, the critical moments when leadership could prevent escalation. He noted how Marcus's crew had spread out trying to control key points along the dock. Sarah Chen stepped forward, her voice firm despite her obvious concern. "This is a working dock. We've got schedules to keep and families to feed. Take your game somewhere else." Several of the deckhands murmured in agreement, though they watched the rebels warily. One of Marcus's crew, a heavily tattooed man with brass knuckles glinting on his fingers, moved toward Sarah. "Pretty ladies got opinions," he sneered, reaching out to touch her face. Before his hand could make contact, Tom's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "That's far enough." The words were quiet, but carried the unmistakable weight of command. Tom hadn't moved from his position, but something in his tone made the rebel freeze mid-motion. The atmosphere shifted as all eyes turned to the former Marine. Marcus sized up Tom, noting his solid stance and the careful way he held himself, telltale signs of military training. "Well, well," Marcus said. "Looks like we've got ourselves a hero." He gestured to his crew, who began to form a loose circle around Tom. "You know what happens to heroes around here?" Old Jack Murphy set down his thermos and moved to stand beside Tom, his aged frame still straight with dignity. Mike Thompson emerged from behind the bait shop counter gripping a gaff hook. One by one, the other fishermen began positioning themselves strategically around the dock, their message clear. They wouldn't be intimidated. Tom's voice remained steady as he addressed Marcus directly. "You've got two choices here. Leave now, respect this dock and the people who work it, or find out exactly why that's your best option." His eyes, hardened by years of combat, locked onto Marcus with unwavering intensity. Marcus laughed, though the sound held less confidence than before. "You threatening me, old man? Do you know who we are?" He spread his arms wide, indicating his crew and their impressive boats. "We're the harbor rebels. We take what we want." "No," Tom replied calmly. "You're just bullies who haven't met real resistance yet. I've seen your kind before, in places a lot tougher than this. Trust me, you're not as intimidating as you think." The brass-knuckled rebel moved suddenly, throwing a punch aimed at Tom's head. But Tom wasn't there anymore. With fluid efficiency born from years of close-quarters combat training, he stepped inside the man's guard, redirecting the punch while simultaneously sweeping his legs. The rebel crashed to the dock with a heavy thud, his brass knuckles skittering across the wooden planks. The other rebels tensed, reaching for concealed weapons, but Tom's voice stopped them cold. "Consider carefully what happens next," he warned, his tone carrying the authority of someone intimately familiar with violence. "You're not just facing me. Look around." The rebels found themselves surrounded by determined faces. The fishermen had positioned themselves strategically, armed with gaffs, boat hooks, and other tools of their trade. Even Sarah Chen held a heavy wrench with practiced confidence. The morning sun glinted off the Marine Force Recon tattoo on Tom's forearm as he helped the fallen rebel to his feet with professional courtesy. Marcus glared at Tom, his previous swagger dampened by the reality of his situation. "This isn't over," he spat, though he took a step back toward his boat. "Nobody disrespects the harbor rebels." "This isn't about respect," Tom replied evenly. "It's about choosing the wrong place to make trouble. We protect our own here." He gestured to the community of fishermen standing firm around him. "You want to race boats and play games? Do it somewhere else. This dock is off limits." The rebels retreated to their vessels, their departure lacking the confidence of their arrival. As they prepared to cast off, Marcus pointed at Tom, his face twisted with wounded pride. "We'll be back. Count on it." Tom simply nodded. "We'll be here." The words carried both a promise and a warning. The harbor rebels' engines roared to life, and they sped away from the dock, leaving churning wakes that rocked the moored fishing boats. As the rebels disappeared around the harbor entrance, the tension began to ease. The fishermen exchanged relieved glances, though they knew this was likely just the beginning. Old Jack clapped Tom on the shoulder, his weathered face creased with a knowing smile. "Semper Fi, son," he said quietly. Tom nodded in acknowledgement. It seemed he wasn't the only veteran at Marina Point. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The remainder of the morning at Marina Point passed with an undercurrent of watchfulness. The fishermen resumed their duties, but there was a new awareness in their movements, a heightened sense of vigilance. Tom observed how the community had naturally organized itself, experienced hands keeping an eye on the harbor entrance while others worked in pairs, maintaining clear lines of sight across the dock. Mike Thompson approached Tom as he was securing his vessel's afternoon catch. "You think they'll really come back?" he asked, his voice low to avoid alarming the younger deckhands working nearby. Tom straightened, his eyes scanning the horizon where the harbor rebels had disappeared. "Count on it," he replied. "Men like Marcus don't handle humiliation well. They'll return, probably with more people, trying to prove something." He secured the last rope with a practiced knot. "But this time we'll be ready." Sarah Chen joined them, her expression determined. "Then we need a plan. My father didn't build this business just to have some thugs take it away." Several other fishermen gathered around, including old Jack, who had been quietly observing the group. "Tom's right," Jack said, adjusting his weathered captain's hat. "I've seen their type before, back when I was serving in the Navy. They'll try to catch us off guard, make an example of the dock." He exchanged a knowing look with Tom. But they don't understand what they're dealing with. Throughout the afternoon, Tom worked with the dock community to implement security measures. Drawing on his military experience, he helped establish communication protocols among the boats and organized rotating watches. The fishermen began parking their vessels strategically, making it harder for unauthorized boats to approach the main pier. As sunset approached, Mike Thompson called a meeting in the bait shop. The small space was crowded with fishermen, deckhands, and boat owners, all united by their determination to protect their livelihood. Tom stood near the counter, his presence reassuring as he outlined their strategy. "They'll likely come at night," he explained, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had commanded Marines in combat zones. "They'll want to make a statement, probably try to damage some equipment or boats. But their real goal is fear. They want us to feel helpless, to give up without a real fight." A younger deckhand spoke up, his voice tinged with anxiety. "But we're just fishermen. These guys are criminals. They might have weapons." Tom nodded, acknowledging the concern. "They might, but we have something stronger than weapons. We have unity and purpose. This isn't just about protecting boats and equipment. It's about standing up for our community. Old Jack stepped forward, his voice gruff but clear. "I served with men like Tom in my day. Trust his instincts. The harbor rebels may think they're tough, but they've never faced a united front of people protecting their own." As if on cue, the distant sound of high-powered engines echoed across the water. The fishermen exchanged determined glances, moving to their assigned positions with practiced efficiency. Tom noted with approval how quickly they had adapted to their defensive roles. Sarah Chen, who had insisted on being part of the watch rotation, spoke quietly from near the door. "They're coming back earlier than we expected." Her hand tightened on the marine radio she'd been assigned for communications. "Good," Tom replied, his calm demeanor steadying those around him. "Better to deal with this now than let them think we're vulnerable at night." He turned to address the group one last time. "Remember, we stay calm, we stay together, and we show them that Marina Point isn't their playground." The harbor rebels' boats appeared around the harbor entrance, their engines thundering in the evening air. This time there were 5 vessels instead of 3, and they moved with aggressive purpose toward the dock. Marcus stood at the helm of his lead boat, his face twisted in a mask of anger and wounded pride. As the rebels approached, they found the dock had changed. The random scatter of vessels had been replaced by an organized arrangement that left them no clear path to dock. Fishermen stood at strategic points, their stance casual but alert. Floodlights, normally used for night fishing, were positioned to illuminate any approach to the main pier. Tom stepped forward to the edge of the dock, his position carefully chosen to be visible but defensible. The combat veteran in him noted the rebels' aggressive formation, the likely positions of hidden weapons, the subtle tells of men preparing for violence. But he also saw their uncertainty, the way they registered the organized resistance before them. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine the future of Marina Point. The harbor rebels had returned seeking revenge, but they were about to learn a harsh lesson about the difference between simple intimidation and true strength, a lesson that Tom Richardson had learned in the unforgiving classroom of combat, and one he was prepared to teach again. Marcus brought his vessel to a halt several yards from the dock, his engines idling aggressively in the evening water. The harbor rebels' additional boats spread out in a practiced formation, attempting to establish a blockade of their own. The tension in the air was palpable as Marcus raised a megaphone to his lips. "You've got some nerve," his amplified voice boomed across the water. "Nobody disrespects the harbor rebels and gets away with it. This is your last chance to clear out peacefully before we show you what real trouble looks like." Tom stood his ground, his posture relaxed but alert. Years of combat experience had taught him that moments like these often determined the outcome of conflicts. His voice carried clearly across the water, powered by the same command presence that had led Marines through intense combat situations. "You've already seen what happens when you challenge this community," Tom responded. "Nothing's changed since this morning except now we're better prepared for your kind of trouble." Marcus's face contorted with rage. He gestured to his crew, and several rebels began moving hardware into visible positions: steel chains, baseball bats, and what appeared to be Molotov cocktails. "You think your little fishing community can stand against us? We've taken over 3 marinas up the coast. Your dock is nothing." The fishermen held their positions, their resolve strengthened by Tom's steady presence. Old Jack Murphy stepped forward, positioning himself beside Tom. "Son," he called out to Marcus, "you might want to reconsider your math. Those other marinas were isolated, vulnerable. We're neither." As if to emphasize his point, the sound of additional boat engines resonated across the harbor. From around both sides of the marina, a dozen fishing vessels appeared, piloted by crews from neighboring docks who had heard about the morning's confrontation. They moved into position with practiced skill, effectively surrounding the harbor rebels' formation. Tom allowed himself a small smile. The marine radio network had served its purpose, demonstrating that Marina Point didn't stand alone. The harbor rebels' boats were now surrounded by a wall of working vessels, their crews standing ready with fire hoses and emergency equipment. Marcus's expression flickered as he assessed the changed situation. His carefully planned show of force had been turned against him. One of his lieutenants, the same man who had worn brass knuckles in the morning confrontation, spoke urgently in his ear. "You're surrounded, Marcus," Tom stated calmly. "Those other Marinas you intimidated? They're watching right now, waiting to see if someone finally stands up to the harbor rebels. Think carefully about your next move." The rebels shifted uneasily in their boats. The situation had evolved beyond their experience with simple intimidation. They were faced not just with resistance, but with organized, community-wide opposition. Marcus raised the megaphone again, but his voice had lost some of its previous confidence. "You think numbers scare us? We've dealt with worse. One word from me, and we'll light this whole dock up. How many boats are you willing to lose?" Tom's response was measured but firm. "And how many of your people are you willing to lose? Look around, Marcus, really look. These aren't weekend warriors you're threatening. These are men and women who work the sea for a living. They understand risk, respect power, and know how to handle themselves in dangerous waters." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But more importantly, they know the difference between real strength and empty threats. Your group preys on the isolated and vulnerable. Today, you're facing a united community that's done tolerating bullies." Sarah Chen's voice rang out from her position near the fuel station. "We've already notified the Coast Guard about your return. They're very interested in the reports of vandalism and intimidation from the other marinas. How long do you think you can stay here before they arrive?" This information sent a ripple of unease through the rebel boats. Several crew members began looking nervously over their shoulders, clearly reconsidering their position. The mention of the Coast Guard had struck a nerve. Organized criminals who could handle local law enforcement often drew the line at federal attention. Marcus's face darkened as he realized his carefully cultivated image of invincibility was crumbling. He had built his power on the assumption that working communities would rather submit than risk confrontation. Now, faced with organized resistance led by someone who clearly understood conflict, his options were rapidly diminishing. "This isn't over," he snarled into the megaphone, but the threat sounded hollow even to his own ears. "Nobody challenges the harbor rebels." Tom's voice cut through the evening air with quiet authority. "It is over, Marcus. You just haven't accepted it yet. The Coast Guard will be here soon, and they'll be very interested in your boat's modifications and whatever cargo you're carrying. Your choice now is simple. Leave this dock and its community alone, or face consequences far beyond anything you're prepared to handle." The rebels' formation began to waver as several boats drifted out of position, their crews clearly anxious to depart before law enforcement arrived. Marcus looked around, seeing his authority diminish with each passing moment. The carefully constructed intimidation that had served him so well at other marinas had been systematically dismantled by a community led by someone who understood real conflict. Marcus stood at the helm of his vessel, his authority visibly crumbling as the reality of a situation became impossible to ignore. The distant wail of Coast Guard sirens carried across the water, confirming that time was running out for the harbor rebels. His crew exchanged nervous glances, their earlier bravado replaced by growing anxiety. "Last warning," Tom called out, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "You have exactly 2 minutes to clear this harbor before you're explaining those boat modifications to federal authorities. Your reputation won't mean much in a Coast Guard holding cell." The carefully orchestrated unity of the fishing community had transformed what should have been a simple intimidation operation into a tactical nightmare for the rebels. Marcus surveyed the wall of fishing vessels surrounding his boats, noting the determined faces of their crews. These weren't the isolated, vulnerable targets he was accustomed to threatening. With a surge of frustrated rage, Marcus gunned his engine. "This isn't finished," he shouted, but his words were nearly drowned out by the sound of his own retreat. The other rebel boats quickly followed suit, their powerful engines roaring as they executed a hasty withdrawal from the harbor. As the harbor rebels disappeared into the gathering dusk, a collective sense of relief swept through the assembled fishing community. Vessels from neighboring docks began to disperse, their crews exchanging waves and nods of solidarity with the Marina Point fishermen. The show of unity had transformed a potential disaster into a decisive victory. Tom remained at his position until the last echo of the rebels' engines faded away. His tactical assessment told him that while the immediate threat had passed, the situation required continued vigilance. He turned to address the gathered community, his expression serious but satisfied. "Well done, everyone," he said, his voice carrying across the dock. "But stay alert. Groups like that often try one last desperate move when they feel cornered." The fishermen nodded in understanding, maintaining their defensive positions even as they began to relax slightly. Old Jack approached Tom, his weathered face creased with a knowing smile. "Reminds me of the Mekong Delta," he said quietly. "Sometimes the strongest defense is just showing you're ready for anything." Tom nodded in agreement, recognizing the wisdom of a fellow veteran. Sarah Chen secured her vessel's lines before joining them. "Do you really think they'll try again?" she asked, her voice carrying both concern and determination. "They seem pretty rattled by the Coast Guard mention." "They might," Tom replied honestly. "But not here. Marcus and his crew prey on isolated targets. Today they learned that Marina Point isn't isolated anymore." He gestured to the surrounding community. "We've shown them what happens when people stand together." Mike Thompson emerged from the bait shop where he'd been coordinating with neighboring docks via radio. "Word spreading up and down the coast," he reported. "Other marinas are organizing their own defense committees. The harbor rebels just lost their advantage of intimidation." The following hour was spent securing the dock for the night. Tom helped establish a rotating watch schedule, though he suspected it wouldn't be necessary. The harbor rebels had been exposed as what they truly were: bullies who relied on fear rather than genuine strength. As the evening settled over Marina Point, the community gathered in the bait shop for coffee and conversation. The atmosphere was different now. There was a new confidence in the air, a sense of empowerment that came from standing together against intimidation. "You know," Mike said, addressing Tom as he poured coffee for the group, "we've had trouble before, but nothing like this. Most of us wouldn't have known how to handle those rebels if you hadn't stepped up." Tom shook his head slightly. "I just showed you what you already had: the strength of unity. Every person here played a part in protecting this dock." He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of his fellow fishermen. That's what the harbor rebels didn't understand. They saw a bunch of individual targets. They never expected to find a community. Sarah, who had been quiet for a while, spoke up. "My father always said the sea teaches you who you can trust. Today proved him right." She raised her coffee cup slightly. "To Marina Point, and to the man who showed us how to protect it." The impromptu toast was echoed around the room, but Tom's mind was already on the future. He knew that while this battle was won, the larger war against intimidation and exploitation was ongoing. However, Marina Point had demonstrated something powerful: that when good people stand together, bullies lose their power. As night fell over the dock, the regular sounds of the working waterfront resumed: the gentle lapping of waves, the creak of moored vessels, the distant call of seabirds. But there was something new in the atmosphere, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. Marina Point had faced a serious threat and emerged stronger, united by the leadership of a combat veteran who understood that true strength comes not from intimidation, but from the courage to stand together against it. The harbor rebels had indeed chosen the wrong dock, the wrong community, and definitely the wrong veteran to threaten. In doing so, they had inadvertently helped transform Marina Point from a simple fishing dock into a symbol of resistance against intimidation, proving that sometimes the most powerful weapon against bullies is the courage to stand united against them. In the weeks following the confrontation with the harbor rebels, Marina Point underwent a subtle but significant transformation. The community's successful stand against intimidation had created ripple effects that extended far beyond the local fishing dock. Tom observed these changes with quiet satisfaction as he went about his daily routines. Word of the incident spread rapidly along the coastline, transmitted through the efficient network of marine radio communications and dock-to-dock contacts. Other marinas and fishing communities, inspired by Marina Point's example, began implementing their own security measures. The isolated vulnerabilities that the harbor rebels had previously exploited were systematically eliminated as communities united in mutual support. One morning, approximately 3 weeks after the confrontation, Mike Thompson approached Tom as he was preparing his vessel for the day's fishing. "Coast Guard made some interesting arrests yesterday," Mike reported, his voice carrying a note of satisfaction. "Seems they caught Marcus and his crew trying to intimidate a marina up north. Only this time they were met by an organized response from 3 different fishing communities." Tom nodded, unsurprised by the development. "They never understood that their power came from isolation," he responded, securing a rope with practiced efficiency. Once communities started working together, their intimidation tactics became useless. The investigation into the harbor rebels revealed a pattern of criminal activities that extended beyond simple intimidation. Federal authorities discovered evidence of smuggling operations, illegal racing schemes, and systematic extortion of waterfront businesses. Marcus's attempt to establish control over Marina Point had inadvertently led to the unraveling of his entire criminal enterprise. Sarah Chen, whose business had flourished in the newly secured environment, often reflected on how the incident had changed their community. "It's not just about feeling safer," she explained to a group of fishermen one afternoon. "It's about knowing we can face any challenge when we stand together." The dock itself had evolved as well. The security measures implemented during the crisis had been refined into standard procedures that enhanced safety without disrupting daily operations. Regular communication channels between marinas had strengthened business relationships and created new opportunities for cooperation. Old Jack, who had seen many changes during his decades on the water, perhaps summarized it best. "Sometimes it takes a storm to show you the strength of your anchors." That day with the harbor rebels showed us what we're capable of when we unite behind the right leadership. Tom's role in the community subtly shifted following the incident. While he maintained his usual modest demeanor, his fellow fishermen increasingly sought his advice on matters beyond security. His experience in handling crisis situations, combined with his natural leadership abilities, made him an invaluable resource for the growing network of cooperative fishing communities. One evening, as the sun set over Marina Point, Mike organized a small gathering at the bait shop to mark the 1-month anniversary of their stand against the harbor rebels. The atmosphere was casual but purposeful, reflecting the newfound confidence of the community. "You know," Mike addressed the gathered fishermen, "before all this happened, we were just individual boats sharing a dock. Now, we're something more." He gestured to the marina, where vessels moved smoothly through their evening routines with coordinated efficiency. "We've become a real community, looking out for each other, working together." Sarah added her perspective, her voice carrying across the quiet shop. "My father always said the sea doesn't forgive those who face it alone. I never fully understood what he meant until now." She looked at Tom with respect. "It took a veteran to show us that the same principle applies to facing human threats." Tom listened to these observations with characteristic humility, but he recognized the truth in them. The harbor rebels' attempt to dominate Marina Point had instead catalyzed its transformation into something stronger and more resilient. The lessons learned in combat, about unity, preparedness, and the strength of organized resistance, had found new application in civilian life. As darkness settled over the dock, the regular sounds of the working waterfront created a peaceful backdrop to the gathering. The gentle lapping of waves against the pylons, the creak of moored vessels, and the distant call of seabirds combined in a familiar symphony that seemed somehow more meaningful now. The harbor rebels had indeed chosen the wrong veteran to challenge, but their mistake had yielded unexpected benefits. Marina Point emerged not just as a safe haven for its working community, but as a model for other waterfront operations facing similar challenges. The legacy of that confrontation lived on in strengthened relationships, enhanced security protocols, and a deeply ingrained understanding that true security comes from unity and mutual support. Tom stood at the edge of the dock, watching the last light fade from the horizon. The sea stretched out before him as challenging and unforgiving as ever, but he knew that Marina Point would face whatever came next as a united community. The skills and principles he had learned in combat had helped transform a group of independent fishermen into something more powerful, a community bound together by shared purpose and mutual trust. The evening ended with quiet conversations and plans for the future, but the underlying message was clear. Marina Point had not just survived a threat, it had emerged stronger, wiser, and more united. The harbor rebels, in their attempt to intimidate a former combat veteran and his community, had inadvertently helped create something they could never defeat, a unified force built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and the understanding that true strength lies not in intimidation, but in standing together against it. 6 months after the harbor rebels' failed attempt to intimidate Marina Point, the transformation of the coastal community had exceeded all expectations. The incident that began as a confrontation between criminal intimidation and organized resistance had evolved into a model for waterfront security and cooperation that garnered attention from maritime authorities along the entire coastline. Thomas Richardson stood at his familiar position on the main pier one morning, observing the systematic efficiency that now characterized Marina Point's operations. The dock had maintained its working character, while incorporating sophisticated security measures that enhanced rather than impeded daily activities. Professional security cameras now supplemented the traditional watchfulness of the community, their presence both a deterrent and a reflection of the dock's commitment to safety. The Harbor Security Coalition meeting is scheduled for next week, Mike Thompson informed Tom as he approached with his morning coffee. Representatives from 23 marinas will be attending. They're particularly interested in your insights about community-based security protocols. The coalition, formed in the wake of the Harbor Rebels incident, had become an effective network for sharing information and coordinating responses to maritime security challenges. Tom's experience, both from his military service and the successful defense of Marina Point, had proven invaluable in its development. The Coast Guard commander called yesterday, Mike continued, his tone reflecting the pride felt throughout the community. They're using Marina Point as a case study in their training programs for port security. Apparently, our response to the Harbor Rebels is considered a textbook example of effective civilian law enforcement cooperation. Tom nodded, acknowledging the information while maintaining his characteristic modesty. The prosecution of Marcus and his crew had revealed an extensive criminal network operating along the coast. The evidence provided by Marina Point's organized resistance had contributed significantly to dismantling multiple criminal enterprises that had previously operated with impunity. Sarah Chen's vessel returned from an early morning run, her crew executing a practiced docking maneuver that reflected the enhanced professionalism now standard at Marina Point. The new apprenticeship program is exceeding expectations, she reported, joining Tom and Mike. We've got 15 young people learning traditional fishing skills alongside modern safety and security protocols. It's exactly what this industry needed. The program, initially proposed by Tom as a way to ensure the long-term sustainability of the fishing community, had quickly gained support from maritime authorities and educational institutions. It combined practical fishing skills with formal training in maritime safety, navigation, and community-based security measures. Old Jack Murphy, who had recently taken on a role mentoring new fishermen, approached the group. "Just heard from my contacts up north," he reported. "The last of the marinas previously intimidated by the Harbor Rebels has implemented our security model. The transformation of the coast is nearly complete." The systematic changes initiated at Marina Point had indeed spread far beyond its boundaries. The understanding that community unity represented the strongest defense against intimidation had revolutionized maritime security along the entire coastline. Former victims of exploitation had become proactive participants in their own protection, supported by a network of mutual assistance and shared resources. The district attorney's office confirmed final sentencing in the Harbor Rebels case, Mike added, consulting his phone. Marcus received 15 years for organized criminal activities with additional charges pending. His crew accepted plea deals in exchange for cooperation with ongoing investigations. The legal resolution of the harbor rebels' threat had validated Marina Point's approach to community defense. The evidence gathered through organized resistance and cooperation with law enforcement had proven devastating to the criminal enterprise's attempts to maintain its operations. Tom reflected on the broader implications of their success. The principles he had learned in combat, the importance of unit cohesion, strategic preparation, and coordinated response to threats, had found new application in civilian maritime security. Marina Point had demonstrated that effective security didn't require militarization, but rather the careful application of proven principles adapted to civilian needs. "We've had inquiries from inland communities facing similar challenges," Mike noted. "They're interested in adapting our model to their situations." Apparently, the principles of community-based security transcend maritime applications. The sun climbed higher over Marina Point as the morning progressed, illuminating a working waterfront that had become a symbol of successful community transformation. The dock bustled with activity, but it was organized activity, characterized by professional efficiency and mutual awareness that enhanced both productivity and security. Sarah gestured toward a group of apprentices receiving instruction in maritime safety procedures. "This is the real victory," she observed. "Not just stopping the harbor rebels, but building something stronger and more sustainable for the future. We're not just protecting what we have, we're creating something better." Tom nodded in agreement. The confrontation with the harbor rebels had indeed catalyzed positive change, but it was the community's response to that challenge that had created lasting transformation. Marina Point had evolved from a vulnerable target into a model of resilience, demonstrating that the most effective defense against intimidation lies not in matching force with force, but in building communities too strong to be intimidated. As the morning activity settled into familiar routines, Tom returned to his preparations for the day's fishing. The dock had changed, the community had grown stronger, and the lessons learned had spread far beyond their original context. But the fundamental truth remained unchanged. When good people stand together against intimidation, guided by experienced leadership and committed to mutual support, they create something that no force of intimidation can overcome. The harbor rebels had chosen the wrong veteran to challenge at Marina Point, but their mistake had ultimately contributed to positive change that extended far beyond their comprehension. In attempting to intimidate a community, they had instead catalyzed its transformation into something far more powerful, a model of organized resistance that would continue to inspire and protect maritime communities for generations to come. The transformation of Marina Point had attracted attention from maritime authorities and security experts across the region. 1 year after the confrontation with the harbor rebels, the dock hosted a delegation of law enforcement officials and maritime security specialists interested in studying its successful community-based security model. Thomas Richardson, maintaining his characteristic professionalism, conducted a comprehensive briefing for the visitors in the recently renovated Marina Conference Facility. The space, formerly a storage area above the bait shop, had been converted to accommodate the increasing number of professional development sessions hosted by the community. "The fundamental principle underlying our security protocol is proactive community engagement," Tom explained to the assembled group. "Traditional security measures often focus exclusively on technological solutions or formal enforcement mechanisms. Our experience demonstrates that while these elements are valuable, the foundation of effective maritime security lies in organized community response." Commander Matthews of the Coast Guard's Maritime Security Division nodded in agreement. "The statistics support your assessment, Mr. Richardson. Since the implementation of your security model across regional maritime facilities, we've documented a 60% reduction in reported incidents of criminal activity in protected harbors." The briefing room's windows provided a clear view of Marina Point's daily operations, where the practical application of these security principles was evident. Vessels moved with coordinated efficiency, Crew members maintained consistent situational awareness, and the integrated security measures functioned seamlessly within normal activities. Perhaps most significant, Tom continued, is the transformation in community perception. What began as a defensive response to criminal intimidation has evolved into a comprehensive approach to maritime security that enhances rather than impedes commercial operations. Sarah Chen, who had become the coordinator for Marina Point's professional development programs, presented data demonstrating the economic benefits of their security model. "We've documented a 28% increase in operational efficiency," she reported. "The organized protocols that enhance security also streamline routine procedures, creating a more productive working environment." The visiting officials were particularly interested in the Marina's apprenticeship program, which had become a model for maritime workforce development. The integration of traditional fishing skills with modern security protocols had created a new generation of maritime professionals equipped to handle contemporary challenges. "The program's success rate speaks for itself," Sarah explained, displaying graduation statistics on the conference room's monitors. 92% of our apprentices complete the program, and 87% remain in the maritime industry. These numbers significantly exceed traditional maritime training programs. During a break in the presentations, Mike Thompson led a tour of the Marina's security infrastructure. The visiting officials noted how seamlessly the security measures integrated with normal operations. Advanced surveillance systems complemented natural observation points, while communication protocols enhanced rather than complicated routine activities. Mike explained, "The key element is that our security measures grow from the community's natural patterns rather than being imposed upon them. We've enhanced what already worked, rather than trying to force new procedures that might disrupt effective operations." Old Jack Murphy, who had assumed responsibility for the Marina's historical documentation, shared perspective on the transformation's broader implications. "What you're seeing here isn't just about security," he told the visitors. "It's about the evolution of maritime community organization. The Harbor Rebels incident simply catalyzed changes that were already necessary." The afternoon session focused on the legal framework supporting Marina Point's security model. The district attorney's office had worked closely with the community to develop protocols that facilitated effective law enforcement cooperation while protecting legitimate maritime operations. "The prosecution success rate in maritime-related criminal cases has increased significantly," reported District Attorney Harrison. "The organized documentation and professional witness protocols developed at Marina Point have become standard procedures in our maritime law enforcement operations." Tom maintained his professional demeanor throughout the presentations, but those who knew him well could detect his quiet satisfaction in the community's achievements. The principles he had learned in military service had found effective civilian application, creating something more valuable than simple security measures. As the delegation toured the facility, they observed the practical implementation of these principles. The apprenticeship program's afternoon training session demonstrated emergency response procedures, while regular crews executed routine operations with practiced efficiency. The integration of security awareness into normal activities was evident at every level. "The most significant outcome," Tom explained during the closing session, "is the establishment of sustainable security protocols that strengthen rather than burden the community. We've created systems that enhance operational efficiency while providing effective protection against criminal activities." The visiting officials departed with comprehensive documentation of Marina Point's security model, but the most valuable lessons weren't found in the written materials. The real achievement was visible in the confident efficiency of daily operations, the professional development of new maritime workers, and the enhanced productivity of a community that had transformed threat response into operational improvement. Marina Point had evolved beyond its initial role as a symbol of resistance against intimidation. It had become a model for maritime community organization, demonstrating how effective security measures could enhance rather than impede commercial operations. The wrong veteran had indeed been challenged at the fishing dock, but the resulting transformation had created benefits far beyond simple security improvements. 18 months after the Harbor Rebels incident, Marina Point hosted its inaugural Maritime Security and Community Development Conference. The event brought together representatives from coastal communities, law enforcement agencies, and maritime industry leaders to examine the comprehensive changes that had transformed the region's waterfront operations. Thomas Richardson delivered the conference's keynote address in the newly constructed Maritime Education Center, a facility that symbolized the community's evolution from a simple fishing dock to a regional center for maritime professional development. His presentation focused on the systematic application of security principles within commercial maritime operations. The most effective security measures, Tom explained to the assembled delegates, are those that enhance rather than impede routine operations. Our experience at Marina Point demonstrates that properly implemented security protocols can actually improve operational efficiency while providing robust protection against criminal activities. The conference's morning session featured a detailed analysis of the Harbor Rebels case, presented jointly by federal prosecutors and maritime security specialists. The presentation highlighted how organized community resistance had not only thwarted criminal intimidation, but had also provided the foundation for systematic improvements in maritime security. The evidence gathered through Marina Point's organized response proved instrumental in dismantling multiple criminal enterprises, Federal Prosecutor Elizabeth Martinez reported. More importantly, the protocols developed during this incident have significantly improved our ability to prosecute maritime-related criminal activities throughout the region. Sarah Chen, now serving as Marina Point's Director of Professional Development, presented data demonstrating the economic impact of their integrated security model. The implementation of comprehensive security protocols has resulted in measurable improvements across all operational metrics, she detailed. Efficiency has increased by 35%, while insurance costs have decreased by 40% due to reduced risk factors. The afternoon sessions focused on practical applications, with delegates observing Marina Point's operations firsthand. The integration of security measures into daily activities demonstrated how protective protocols could enhance rather than restrict commercial operations. The apprenticeship program's training exercises provided particular interest, showcasing the development of maritime professionals equipped to handle both traditional and emerging challenges. The key to sustainable security, Mike Thompson explained during a dockside demonstration, lies in developing systems that support rather than burden regular operations. Our protocols have become standard procedure, not because they're required, but because they improve overall efficiency. The conference's second day examined the broader implications of Marina Point's transformation. Representatives from maritime communities along the coast shared experiences implementing similar programs, while law enforcement officials presented data showing significant reductions in criminal activities throughout the region. The Harbor Rebels incident, Commander Matthews noted during his presentation, served as a catalyst for regional maritime security reform. The protocols developed at Marina Point have fundamentally changed how we approach waterfront security operations. Old Jack Murphy, addressing a session on community development, provided historical perspective on the transformation. What started as a response to criminal intimidation has evolved into a model for maritime community organization, he explained. We've created something that strengthens not just our security, but our entire operational framework. The conference's technical sessions examined the integration of modern security technology with traditional maritime operations. The sophisticated surveillance systems and communication protocols developed at Marina Point demonstrated how advanced security measures could complement, rather than complicate, regular activities. The effectiveness of our security model, Tom explained during a panel discussion, comes from its organic integration with normal operations. We've enhanced natural surveillance patterns and communication channels rather than imposing artificial systems that might disrupt efficient operations. During breaks between sessions, delegates toured Marina Point's facilities, observing the practical implementation of security protocols. The apprenticeship program's training exercises demonstrated emergency response procedures, while regular crews executed routine operations with practiced efficiency that reflected their enhanced security awareness. The conference's final day focused on future developments, with presentations examining emerging challenges in maritime security and community organization. The discussions highlighted how Marina Point's model could adapt to address evolving threats while maintaining operational efficiency. The sustainability of our security protocols, Sarah Chen explained in her closing presentation, comes from their foundation in practical maritime operations. We're not just preventing criminal activities, we're improving how we conduct our daily business. As the conference concluded, delegates departed with comprehensive documentation of Marina Point's security model, but the most valuable lessons weren't found in the written materials. The real achievement was visible in the confident efficiency of daily operations, the professional development of new maritime workers, and the enhanced productivity of a community that had transformed threat response into operational improvement. Tom observed the departing delegates from his familiar position on the main pier, reflecting on the distance Marina Point had traveled from that confrontation with the harbor rebels. What began as a necessary response to criminal intimidation had evolved into a comprehensive model for maritime community organization, demonstrating how effective security measures could enhance rather than impede commercial operations. The wrong veteran had indeed been challenged at the fishing dock, but the resulting transformation had created benefits far beyond simple security improvements. Marina Point had become a model for maritime community development, proving that organized resistance to intimidation could catalyze positive changes that strengthened entire communities. 2 years after the Harbor Rebels confrontation, Marina Point's transformation had attracted international attention. Maritime security experts and community development specialists from across the globe visited the facility to study its innovative approach to waterfront security and operational efficiency. The success of the model had transcended its original context, demonstrating principles applicable to diverse maritime environments. Thomas Richardson, maintaining his characteristic professionalism, found himself increasingly engaged in consulting activities with maritime organizations worldwide. His experience in translating military security principles into effective civilian applications had proven invaluable for communities facing similar challenges. The fundamental principle, Tom explained during a consultation with representatives from an international port authority, is that effective security measures must enhance rather than impede normal operations. The protocols we developed at Marina Point succeed because they improve operational efficiency while providing robust protection. The Marina Point Professional Development Center, established in response to growing demand for training and integrated security protocols, had become a recognized leader in maritime workforce development. Sarah Chen, serving as executive director, oversaw programs that combined traditional maritime skills with advanced security awareness. Our integrated approach to professional development, Sarah detailed during a program review, produces maritime professionals equipped to handle both operational and security challenges. The success rate of our graduates demonstrates the effectiveness of this comprehensive training model. The implementation of Marina Point's security protocols had generated quantifiable benefits throughout the maritime industry. Insurance providers reported significant reductions in criminal incidents at facilities utilizing the integrated security model, leading to reduced premiums for participating operations. The statistical evidence is compelling, reported maritime insurance analyst Jennifer Roberts. Facilities implementing Marina Point security protocols show an average 65% reduction in security-related incidents, with corresponding improvements in operational efficiency. Mike Thompson, who had assumed responsibility for regional security coordination, worked closely with law enforcement agencies to refine and enhance the communication networks that had proven so effective during the Harbor Rebels incident. The resulting system facilitated rapid response to potential threats while supporting routine operational coordination. Mike explained during a law enforcement briefing, "The key to effective maritime security lies in developing systems that support daily operations." Our communication protocols enhance both security and operational efficiency, making them valuable tools for normal activities as well as emergency response. Old Jack Murphy, whose historical documentation of Marina Point's transformation had become a standard reference for maritime security studies, provided perspective on the broader implications of their success. "What we've created here goes beyond simple security measures," he noted. "We've demonstrated how organized communities can transform external threats into opportunities for systematic improvement." The apprenticeship program, now in its second year, had achieved remarkable success in developing a new generation of maritime professionals. The integration of security awareness into basic training had produced graduates uniquely qualified to handle contemporary maritime challenges. "Our apprentices demonstrate exceptional capability in both traditional maritime skills and modern security protocols," Sarah reported. The placement rate for program graduates remains at 98%, with many assuming leadership positions in maritime operations worldwide. The evolution of Marina Point's security model had generated unexpected benefits in operational efficiency. The systematic organization required for effective security had streamlined routine procedures, reducing costs and improving productivity throughout the facility. "The economic impact has exceeded all projections," noted Regional Economic Development Director Marcus Chen. "The implementation of integrated security protocols has generated measurable improvements in operational efficiency, leading to significant cost reductions and productivity gains." Tom observed these developments with quiet satisfaction, recognizing that the transformation sparked by the Harbor Rebels incident had evolved far beyond its original scope. The principles he had learned in military service had found effective civilian application, creating systems that strengthened entire communities. The Marina Point model had demonstrated that effective security measures could enhance rather than restrict commercial operations. The integration of protective protocols into routine activities had created a more efficient, more productive maritime environment, while providing robust protection against criminal activities. "The sustainable nature of our security model," Tom explained during a maritime industry conference, "comes from its foundation in practical operations. We've created systems that support rather than burden the community, making them valuable tools for daily activities as well as protective measures." The success of Marina Point's transformation had implications beyond maritime security. The principles demonstrated in their response to criminal intimidation had applications in diverse environments where communities faced similar challenges. As Tom stood on the main pier, observing the efficient operations of the facility he had helped transform, he reflected on the distance traveled from that initial confrontation. The Harbor Rebels' attempt to intimidate a veteran at a fishing dock had inadvertently catalyzed changes that strengthened not just Marina Point, but maritime communities worldwide. The wrong veteran had indeed been challenged that day, but the resulting transformation had created benefits far beyond anyone's expectations. Marina Point had become not just a model for maritime security, but a demonstration of how organized communities could transform external threats into opportunities for systematic improvement. 3 years after the Harbor Rebels incident, Marina Point hosted a special ceremony marking the official recognition of its maritime security training program by international maritime authorities. The event brought together representatives from global shipping organizations, security agencies, and maritime communities who had benefited from the protocols developed in response to that pivotal confrontation. Thomas Richardson, who had become a respected figure in maritime security circles while maintaining his role as an active commercial fisherman, delivered remarks that reflected on the journey from conflict to transformation. Standing at the podium in the expanded Maritime Education Center, he addressed an audience that included many who had been present during the original confrontation. "What happened here 3 years ago?" Tom began, his voice carrying the same quiet authority that had faced down the Harbor Rebels. "Wasn't just about stopping criminals. It was about discovering the strength that exists within every community when people stand together against intimidation. The protocols we developed weren't created in a classroom. They emerged from real experience and were tested in real situations." The ceremony included a special presentation by Coast Guard Commander Matthews, who had tracked the evolution of Marina Point's security model since its inception. "The transformation we've witnessed here represents more than improved security measures," he noted. "It demonstrates how organized resistance to criminal activities can catalyze positive changes throughout entire maritime communities." Sarah Chen, whose leadership of the Professional Development Center had earned international recognition, presented data demonstrating the global impact of Marina Point's programs. "Over the past 3 years, we've trained maritime professionals from 37 countries," she reported. "The principles developed here have proven effective in diverse maritime environments worldwide." Mike Thompson, coordinating with law enforcement representatives, shared statistics showing the broader impact of their security protocols. "Criminal activities in protected harbors have decreased by 75% across the region," he detailed. "More importantly, operational efficiency has improved by an average of 40% in facilities implementing these measures." Old Jack Murphy, who had become something of a legend among younger maritime workers, spoke about the human aspect of Marina Point's transformation. "The real victory isn't in the numbers or the protocols," he observed. "It's in creating a community where people look out for each other, where everyone understands their role in maintaining not just security, but the quality of maritime operations." The ceremony included demonstrations by current apprentices, showcasing the integration of traditional maritime skills with advanced security awareness. Their practiced efficiency in executing complex procedures reflected the evolution of maritime training under the new protocols. "These young professionals represent the future of maritime operations," Sarah explained during the demonstration. "They understand that security isn't separate from routine activities. It's an integral part of efficient maritime operations." The event also recognized the contributions of law enforcement agencies that had supported Marina Point's transformation. District Attorney Harrison spoke about the broader impact on maritime law enforcement. "The protocols developed here have revolutionized how we approach maritime security," he noted. "The collaboration between commercial operations and law enforcement has created more effective protection for all maritime communities." Tom, observing the proceedings with his characteristic modesty, reflected on the distance traveled from that first confrontation. The harbor rebels' attempt to intimidate a veteran at a fishing dock had inadvertently sparked changes that strengthened maritime communities worldwide. During a break in the ceremony, Tom walked to his familiar spot on the main pier, where he had first faced down Marcus and his gang. The dock had changed significantly. Modern security systems complemented the traditional maritime infrastructure, while efficient operations reflected the integration of protective protocols into routine activities. Sarah joined him at the pier, her expression thoughtful. "You know," she said, "my father always believed that adversity reveals character. What happened here proved him right, not just about individuals, but about entire communities." Mike Thompson, approaching with a group of international delegates, added his perspective. "The harbor rebels thought they were choosing an easy target," he noted. "Instead, they challenged exactly the wrong veteran at exactly the right moment. Their mistake transformed not just Marina Point but maritime security practices worldwide." The ceremony concluded with the unveiling of a modest plaque commemorating the events that had catalyzed Marina Point's transformation. The inscription read simply, "Dedicated to the power of united communities standing against intimidation. Here began a transformation that strengthened maritime operations worldwide." As the assembled guests departed carrying with them lessons and protocols that would benefit maritime communities globally, Tom remained at his position on the pier. The wrong veteran had indeed been challenged that day, but the resulting transformation had created benefits far beyond anyone's expectations. Marina Point had become not just a model for maritime security, but a testament to the strength found in united communities standing together against intimidation. 5 years after the Harbor Rebels incident, Marina Point had become an international benchmark for maritime security and community development. On a quiet morning, much like the one that had started it all, Thomas Richardson stood at his familiar spot on the main pier, preparing his vessel for another day of fishing. Despite the facility's transformation into a global training center, he had maintained his connection to the practical aspects of maritime operations. The morning sun illuminated a dramatically different Marina Point from the one that had faced down the harbor rebels. Modern security systems blended seamlessly with traditional maritime infrastructure, while efficient operations reflected the sophisticated integration of protective protocols into daily activities. Yet, underneath all the improvements, the essential character of the working waterfront remained intact. "Some things never change," old Jack Murphy observed, joining Tom at the pier with his ever-present thermos of coffee. "Still first out every morning, still keeping watch over everything." The years had added more silver to Jack's hair, but his eyes remained sharp as ever. Sarah Chen approached, carrying tablets containing the latest data from international implementations of the Marina Point security model. "The latest reports are in," she announced. "The protocols have now been adopted by maritime facilities in 45 countries. The success rates are consistent across all locations." Mike Thompson, emerging from the state-of-the-art communications center that had replaced the old bait shop, added his own update. "Coast Guard just confirmed. Not a single successful criminal operation in any protected harbor for the past 2 years. The network we built has effectively eliminated organized maritime crime in the region." Tom nodded, acknowledging the reports while maintaining his focus on preparing his gear. His dedication to maintaining an active role in commercial fishing, despite his international recognition as a maritime security expert, had become legendary among the younger generation of maritime professionals. "You know," Sarah reflected, "I was thinking about Marcus the other day. He was released from federal prison last month. The harbor rebels leader had served his sentence and, according to reports, had undergone a significant transformation of his own. He sent a letter," Mike added. "Asked if he could visit Marina Point, see what it's become. Said he wanted to understand how his biggest mistake led to so much positive change." Tom paused in his preparations, considering this information. "Everyone deserves a chance to learn from their mistakes," he said finally. "That's part of what we teach here." The morning's apprentice group began arriving, their professional demeanor reflecting the high standards of Marina Point's training programs. Among them were participants from 3 continents, drawn by the facility's reputation for excellence in maritime operations and security protocols. "Looking at them," old Jack mused, "it's hard to believe it all started with a gang of troublemakers picking the wrong veteran to challenge. These young folks are learning more than just security procedures. They're learning about community, about standing together." The apprentices gathered for their morning briefing, their attention focused on Sarah as she outlined the day's training schedule. The curriculum had evolved to include not just security protocols and maritime skills, but lessons in community building and ethical leadership. "The real legacy," Tom observed quietly, "isn't in the security systems or the protocols. It's in showing people that when communities stand together, they can transform any challenge into an opportunity for improvement." A Coast Guard vessel passed by the dock, its crew exchanging waves with the Marina Point personnel. The relationship between law enforcement and maritime communities had been revolutionized by the cooperative models developed in the wake of the Harbor Rebels incident. "Remember how nervous everyone was that first morning?" Mike asked, watching the apprentices begin their practical exercises. "Now look at us, training the next generation of maritime professionals, showing them how to build strong communities." The morning sun climbed higher, illuminating a facility that had become far more than just a fishing dock. Marina Point stood as a living testament to the power of united communities, a demonstration of how organized resistance to intimidation could catalyze positive change that reached far beyond its original context. Tom returned to preparing his vessel, his actions deliberate and practiced. Despite all the changes, despite his role in transforming maritime security practices worldwide, he remained at heart a commercial fisherman who understood the importance of maintaining connections to practical maritime operations. "You know what I think?" old Jack said, watching the activity around them. "Those harbor rebels did us a favor without knowing it. They showed us what we could become when we stood together. Their biggest mistake wasn't just challenging the wrong veteran. It was giving us a reason to discover our strength as a community." As the morning activity settled into familiar routines, Tom reflected on the distance traveled from that first confrontation. The wrong veteran had indeed been challenged that day at Marina Point, but the resulting transformation had created something far more significant than anyone could have imagined. A model for how communities could stand together against intimidation and emerge stronger, more unified, and better prepared for whatever challenges the future might bring. The legacy of that confrontation lived on not just in security protocols and training programs, but in the daily operations of maritime communities worldwide. Marina Point had become more than a symbol of resistance against intimidation. It stood as proof that when good people unite behind experienced leadership, they can transform any challenge into an opportunity for positive change that benefits not just their own community, but countless others around the world. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.